Hey there, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to unravel the absolute truth behind one of the most iconic, legendary images in 20th century sports. I'm talking about Abebe Bikila's mind-blowing barefoot Olympic marathon win in 1960.
If you ask almost anyone with even a passing interest in Olympic history about Abebe Bikila, they'll instantly bring up his feat. It's just this perfectly iconic image, right? An Ethiopian marathoner, completely barefoot, just effortlessly gliding through the ancient cobbled streets of Rome to snatch Olympic gold. But here's the crazy part. The world has literally been telling his story completely wrong for over 60 years now. For decades, we all thought we knew the real story. The myth basically goes that this Ethiopian runner was this, anti-modern, primitive force of nature who just effortlessly conquered the course. But actually, scratch that. The reality is way more fascinating. And honestly, it tells us a whole lot more about Europe's assumptions at the time than it does about Bakila's actual athletic brilliance. So let's jump straight into part one, the empire's assumptions. To really get this, we have to look at the extraordinary symbolism at play in the rapidly shifting world of 1960. I mean, think about it. 17 African countries gained their independence in that single year alone. The old colonial empires that had completely dominated for generations were finally starting to crumble. And right against that dramatic backdrop, you have the Olympic marathon route winding right past Rome's ancient monuments. Bikila makes his major, decisive move right near the Arch of Constantine. And this is so incredibly poignant because just 25 years prior, back in 1935, fascist Italy under Mussolini had actually invaded his proudly independent nation of Ethiopia. And then he crosses the finish line in a blistering world record time of 2 hours, 15 minutes, and 16.2 seconds. So the really crucial takeaway here is that right beneath the very monument celebrating Roman conquest, an Ethiopian athlete just quietly, smoothly accelerated away from the rest of the world. He became the very first Black African Olympic champion. And he didn't raise a fist, he didn't make any loud political speeches or give these fiery post-race interviews. He just went out there and ran an absolutely magnificent race. But get this, instead of focusing on his brilliant, undeniable tactics, the press focused entirely elsewhere. Journalists kept falling back on words like instinctive, primitive, or, naturally gifted. Instead of seeing what was actually right in front of them, a 28-year-old disciplined captain in Emperor Haile Selassie's imperial guard executing a literally flawless strategy, European journalists just stared at his feet. They relied heavily on these tired colonial stereotypes, basically framing his victory as some kind of mystical occurrence rather than what it truly was: immense athletic intelligence, top-tier coaching, and rigorous military preparation.
This just brilliantly illustrates how the media completely missed the point back then. I mean, think about it. If a British or American athlete had won that marathon, the press would have obsessed over their training methods, their coaching, the cutting-edge technology they used. But for an African winning barefoot, the commentators just completely invented this romantic return to nature narrative. They just assumed civilization itself was somehow unnecessary for him. It completely robbed Bikila of his agency as a highly prepared, strategic athlete and just replaced the actual man with a flat stereotype.
All right, moving right along to part two, the Adidas accident.
Which brings us to the big question. Was this really some profound rejection of modernity? Was it this deep, philosophical statement about civilization, exactly like the newspapers so eagerly claimed? Did he actually set out that morning intentionally wanting to run barefoot just to prove a point?
Nope, not even close. The truth is honestly hilarious. The shoes just pinched. That's literally it. Before the marathon, he had been issued running shoes. Adidas was already blowing up as a highly visible sporting supplier at the Games, and they provided footwear for a ton of the competitors. But according to Bikila himself, the specific pair he was given just flat out hurt his feet. So, being super pragmatic about it, he just took them off. There was absolutely no grand philosophy here. The shoes just didn't fit. And just like that, because one single pair of shoes failed one specific athlete, the absolute most famous sporting image of the Rome Olympics unintentionally became a massive advertisement strictly against the official equipment. Seriously, just imagine the panic at Adidas headquarters for a second. Adidas Dassler knew perfectly well that Olympic champions sold shoes better than any traditional ad campaign, and suddenly the world's most memorable champion just won the biggest race on earth without them. It definitively proved that elite performance is profoundly, undeniably individual. Commercial sports absolutely love universal, one-size-fits-all solutions, but Bikila essentially reminded everyone that at the end of the day, athletes know their own bodies best.
That takes us right into part 3, the pragmatic champion.
You see, the entire mythology of the barefoot wonder completely falls apart the second we look at his career over the next 4 years. Far from being some kind of barefoot missionary, Bikila actually spent that entire time rigorously testing out new running tech. In 1961, after being introduced by his Swedish coach Ani Niskanen, he worked with Kihachiro Onitsuka, whose company, by the way, later became ASICS, and he tested out these lightweight Tiger Maru shoes in Japan. He immediately noticed the improved grip and ended up winning a marathon with total ease. Then in 1963, he experimented with New Balance at the Boston Marathon. And by 1964, he had actually secured a full deal with Puma to supply his shoes for the Tokyo Olympics. So he clearly wasn't rejecting modern equipment at all. He was just an incredibly expert consumer, relentlessly searching for the perfect fit. And what was the result of all that testing? Well, get this. Competing just 6 weeks after having an emergency appendectomy, which is wild in itself, he completely dominated the Tokyo race. He became the very first person in history to win 2 consecutive Olympic marathons. And this time around, he did it wearing carefully chosen, properly fitted shoes. And he set yet another world record in the process. I really want you to think about what that means. The man forever remembered by the world for running barefoot actually produced an even faster marathon when he was wearing shoes.
And finally, let's wrap up with part 4, outsmarting an empire.
So that famous photograph from Rome created this massive global myth that Bikila himself quietly but firmly disproved. When we actually compare his ultra-pragmatic shoe testing back then to today's intense, highly debated controversies over carbon-plated super shoes, where companies are dropping millions into foam technology and World Athletics has to literally regulate how thick a shoe can be, his mindset was astonishingly contemporary. He was never anti-technology. He was just fiercely pro-performance. He gladly accepted technology when it actually worked for him, and he just plain rejected it when it didn't.
Abebe Bikila sadly passed away in 1973 following complications from a tragic car accident. But, he leaves us with this incredibly profound final question to consider whenever we look back at that iconic 1960 photograph of him gliding through those Roman streets. What exactly are we actually looking at?
Seriously, are we looking at an extraordinary, highly disciplined athlete, or are we simply looking at Europe's imagination of Africa? Did we just witness a man who outpaced the absolute best marathoners in the world and, incidentally outsmarted Adidas? Or are we finally realizing that for one unforgettable evening in Rome, Abebe Bikila actually outsmarted an entire empire of assumptions? Honestly, I think it's high time we finally lift our eyes from his feet and start looking at the brilliant, masterful, tactical champion he truly was.